Cool. Oh no.
2 seconds. We got the logins.
I will give you the login.
I think there's a open one you can connect to as well. Is it Ed?
That's yours.
2 seconds.
Cool. So anyway, hey everybody. I'm Jamie. I am a co-organizer of EdinburghJS. I would like to start with a couple of thank yous, which I always do so that I remember them. The first is thank you to the Bay Centre for hosting us this evening. They give us a little discount on running events here since we're a community meetup. So thank you very much to them. And also thank you very much to the Scottish Government, who have provided a little bit of money over the last couple of months for the ecosystem fund, because obviously the pandemic has hit us hard. We haven't had meetups for a couple of years, so they wanted to provide a little bit of money to help us get going again. So the beer and Coke and pizza that will be here are thanks to the Scottish Government. So it's really appreciated for them, and I think we all know how much we've missed like meeting up in person, hanging out, and chatting and networking. So just in terms of letting you know a little bit about EdinburghJS, we restarted this year. We've got Alan from Product Forge live streaming on YouTube. So if you want to know more about Product Forge, productforge.io. So hackathons. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put together a really community-led thing. So, James last time turned up, he mentioned that he'd been using Sanity, and I said, I've seen Sanity, but I don't know anything about it. Can you please do a talk? So it's that kind of thing where it's sharing your stack. It doesn't necessarily need to go into too much technical detail, but it's an opportunity for us to get to know who else is working with JavaScript in Edinburgh, in Glasgow, in the Central Belt, and to get some networking, whether that's like for job opportunities or just sharing like knowledge and info, mentoring, and so on. Cool. So the first talk of the evening. Can you make your screen bigger, says Alan? Cool. The first talk of the evening is from James, who's going to be talking about Sanity CMS, which, take it away, James. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, I'd like to thank EdinburghJS for the invitation. Quite random. And I'd also like to preface this talk with explaining that in no way am I an expert in this field. This is very much passion-driven, so there's going to be potential gaps in my knowledge, and I think in the delivery of this talk, maybe some of you might acknowledge that, so hopefully we can jump over them together. And yeah, basically, let's just get started. So a bit about myself. I'm a self-taught front-end developer. I've got about 6 or 7 years in the game now, and I'm very passionate about aesthetics and technology, which I think is why ultimately I think front-end development is the harmonious kind of bridge of those two worlds. I've used Sanity for the last 3 years on and off on various freelance projects, but I work with WordPress day-to-day 9 to 5. So interestingly, I almost embody that dichotomy of headless and monolithic structures, or CMSs. So yeah, it's quite apt and interesting that I'm here today. And this picture felt very apt. I found this head when I was I don't know, X years old. I thought it was really cool, and I brought it home and I hid it because obviously your parents aren't going to let you keep this. But yeah, it's like a CPR head, and it just felt perfect because we're talking about a headless structure, a headless CMS today. But yeah, anyway, my dad found it, asked for the photo, and then it got returned back to the NHS. So yeah. So what is headless? First and foremost, to me, headless immediately evokes imagery of big data, cloud servers, whatever. It's a buzzword. But like most buzzwords, it encapsulates as an umbrella term, tool or service or something that aims to solve a problem. So headless is essentially a methodology or a technological ideology whereby your content management system and your presentation layer should be separate entities. Working for a company where we use WordPress, it's become apparent over the last year that by tying yourself into a monolithic structure, eventually as you want to innovate and change or redo your application, it can be quite limiting, I guess. So working with a headless CMS, I think if you're in a greenfield project or if you're an architect or whatnot, I think it's really important to consider the latest technology and tools. There are benefits and obviously weaknesses to both types, but ultimately I think headless provides the most flexibility. Headless is about delivering your content as data via an API, so it's quite lightweight in that respect. I came here for the first time last month, and the dude did like an analogy with Pringles, so I felt it apt as at an EdinburghJS talk I should bring Pringles into the conversation. So I've brought a pot of Pringles, and I think a lot of people, at least for me, I struggled with getting my head around what the headless part of Sanity CMS is. And so ultimately, if you take the lid off the Pringles, this is Sanity CMS, the Pringle pot. Your content is the Pringles within it, and your application is the lid. So basically, you're able to take the application away from the content, and you could put a whole new lid on there. So your application could be like a smartwatch, or even like Android and iOS. Like, you could separate the concerns, and you're not tethered to a particular presentation layer, such as a WordPress front end. And ultimately, why Sanity CMS? I feel like a bit of a Mormon in that I'm trying to like convert some people or whatever. But ultimately, for me, it's been a very rewarding and positive CMS to work with. It's beautiful presentation, and like, just as I started this talk, I'm passionate about aesthetics, and I think if you want to present a CMS or a modern product to a client, then I think the presentation should reflect that, and it shouldn't be convoluted. There are quite a few CMSs in the headless game right now. There's maybe 3 or 4 big players, and of all of them, I think Sanity is the most stripped back, minimal, and customizable. One of the reasons that people maybe shy away from providing admin privileges to a WordPress user or a client is because of the nature of how much is there presented in the WordPress backend. You've got settings that might tank a site, or settings that might not necessarily be relevant to the client. They ultimately just want to add whatever they want to add to their site. And so Sanity has that content-driven design because of the nature of you as a developer designing schemas to outline your data. It's very stripped back, basically, which is quite cool. The JavaScript object-based schema reminds me a lot of advanced custom fields. I don't know if you've worked with WordPress or ACF, but you can export your fields from the GUI to like a PHP export, and yeah, working with that PHP export, it can be quite nice as a developer because you're still in the text editor. You don't have to interact with buttons and stuff. It's just, yeah, it's just nice to stay in that headspace and stay in that dark mode, I guess. Sanity CMS also enables and allows real-time collaboration. So rather than having to ask for permission to enter a document, 2 people or 100 people could be all in the same document, interacting, editing, etc. And from the front end, it provides a kind of like version control type thing where you can see changes and you can see who's doing what and what's going on. And ultimately as well, Sanity CMS is customizable. It's a React front end, and even though I've only scratched the surface of the customization you can take place, yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's an exciting space. Yeah, basically do what the big dogs do. Like in this game of life, you've got companies like Nike, Figma, Movember, Cloudflare. Yeah, basically it's a very happening product. I think they recently completed their C-Day round of investment, and with that kind of ecosystem of like an influx of cash being injected into the application, like, yeah, you've got great documentation, you've got great like content coming out of there, you've got a lot of like collaborations with like YouTubers and stuff, so they're creating a kind of like community, which makes me feel like a bit of a Mormon. But yeah, no disrespect to Mormons, but you know, like, yeah. But yeah, anyway, enough talk. This is like basically what I've been talking about, an insight into Sanity. So on the left here, we have the kind of like schema-based back end of Sanity. And then on the right, we have kind of like the client that is span up within their CLI. Here you can see we're working with the screening schema. And yeah, it's basically fields are created within these objects, and you have like a name, a title, a type, and even a description. So yeah, that's pretty much Sanity. So today's talk, I'm just going to run through how to get started with Sanity, spinning up a studio, interacting with portable text, which is a Sanity-specific kind of way of handling rich text, essentially. They've kind of moved away from HTML markup because in that idea of like treating your content as data, by splitting your data into JSON, it's a lot more customizable and a lot more editable. So yeah, basically, if you wanted to get started with Sanity, first of all, you need to install the CLI, so npm IG blah blah blah, and then you want to run Sanity init. Because I've already got an account, I get this message, but upon fresh install, you will be prompted to authenticate your Sanity account with either GitHub or email. And I do want to reiterate that the account that you kind of authenticate your Sanity CLI with will be the one that you're interacting with your Sanity Studio. So if you don't want to expose your main GitHub account or your main email to like a client-facing project, then this is the time to enter in your kind of, I don't know, work email or whatever. So here I select Create New Project, and you can see below actually you can choose like almost pre-configured like templates, I guess. So if you've done a project with Sanity before and you authenticate your account, it will acknowledge and say, do you want to use these kind of templates? So yeah, basically it's not the best on these big screens, which is a shame. But this is kind of like the wizard builder from the Create New Project command. And the only thing that I wanted to really specify here, which is a shame you can't really see it, but under the project output path, rather than taking the default path, what I've done is I've started to split my repo into two respective folders. So we have Studio, which is the Sanity Studio, and then we also have Web. So when I originally started working with Sanity, I split the concerns because of the nature of like headless methodology, etc. But I found managing two Git repositories, it was just unnecessary, even though the ideology is to keep, I don't know if ideology is the right word, maybe. Anyway, but yeah, that's just that. So Sanity Start. So let's just take you to Sanity Start. It's hella bright. So I'm going to take you to this one instead. So this is a Sanity Studio that I built for my friend. I wanted to provide a space for him on the web to encourage him to share his like poetry and his video making. And it also acted as a project for me to step away from my kind of company that I've set up with my friends and rather just be out in the wild on my own, I guess. And in doing so, I guess I was a bit more passionate about this studio. So things like dark mode you don't get by default, as we all just got flashbang before, like, yeah. And yeah, basically, it's just to kind of like walk you through what Sanity Studio looks like from a front end. So you can have fields like drop downs, rich text, color, images, and I don't know if, yeah, file upload, etc., etc. This is quite a, like, what I consider advanced Sanity structure, whereby I have a document with nested documents within it, and in doing so, it allows the end user to, like, kind of, I don't know, move components around and reorder stuff. Clicking into them, you're welcome to like a kind of like modal. But yeah, traditionally Sanity, it's such a shame that this is so bright. I might, if I turn the brightness down, does that, nah, we still get flashbanged. All right, well, essentially Sanity moves in a panel-like navigation. So because I've customized this, when you click on one of these like main navigation items, I've built it such that you only then interact with the content. But traditionally, if you were to click into these main links, you'd then move into like a row of information, and you navigate until you reach the end of that tree or branch or whatever. So yeah, so because hypothetically I've split my repo into two directories, web and studio. In the terminal or whatever, you'd probably, you want to cd into the studio and sanity start to start your sanity. And then at the root of your project, you want to add these dependencies so that we can interact with sanity in the application. So you don't have to do this per se, but I think it provides cleaner, more refined code. So I create like a kind of lib directory, and I create a client file which imports the sanity client module, and then I export the client. Basically, the most important thing in this is your ID. So I really don't like flashbanging you all, you know, like, but anyway, you get the ID from the sanity backend, which I'm sure if you play with it, you'll learn where that is. And then I also create another file called queries, and this contains all of my Grok queries. Now, Grok is part of the sanity ecosystem. It's quite similar to GraphQL, I guess, in that it's a querying language. Essentially, all queries start with a star, and within the brackets, you are filtering that kind of query. So the star means all, and then in this query, you're saying, I want to capture all documents or types that are editorial and have the feature set to true. And in doing so, you are able to kind of customize and organize the JSON that you receive in the client. So here, you can do a lot of organization and real filtering at the Grok query level before you even get that data sent to the client. So it's quite nice to have quite a refined package or payload that you can then interact with and have less configuring in the client instead. The only main important thing that I feel like I should share at this slide is this kind of like little arrow. So unlike the other, I don't know, key object pairs or whatever, the arrow is pointing to the reference of the URL. So if you were to just have main image equal main image, what you'd get back is quite a congealed like JavaScript object, which wouldn't really make sense. So what we're actually pointing down to is the asset and then asking to get the real URL from the image. So I've got just like a demo one here. I just got a lot going on. So the ultimate, like what we'll display at the end is quite underwhelming, but I'm hoping that we gain a lot from seeing how Sanity is ported into, at this level, a Next.js app. So at the top of my index TypeScript file, I've got an import to those respective files that we just saw, the client and the queries. And then at the getStaticProps level, I'm essentially requesting the data, and this is really the API call. So we're fetching from the client, and we're using the query that we referenced in Grok in the file. And we're passing that payload and data down to props, which we then can pass down to our respective pages and components. It should be noted that I kind of exclusively work with Next.js. I think it's a really cool framework, but if you wanted to work with Sanity CMS in a React, like pure vanilla ecosystem, you would use a useEffect hook and pass an empty array as the second argument to get on initial load. And within that useEffect, you would reference the Grok query and your client, I guess. So here I have, I'm basically passing the props down to the about component. And I thought it would be easier just to walk you around the code instead of trying to like show you in this like isolated world. So here, web, components, about. Yeah, so basically Sanity has deviated away from markup and kind of more traditional HTML elements in terms of pre-rendering content. So your content is filtered into the application as like a concept known as portable text, which is JSON methodology, I guess. And essentially you need a serializer to communicate with the client to say this is how we render that particular content. And Sanity recommend using their own, where is it, text block? Yeah, their own block content module. So I've basically built a component called text block which acts as a wrapper that I will always pass into the component, and that kind of specifically just handles spitting out the text that I need. In doing so, I can then wrap it with kind of like styling wrapper and style accordingly. So yeah, these two elements are really the most important, blocks and serializers. I'm pretty sure they're in lib, yeah. So this is quite a convoluted serializer because over the course of like the time working with Sanity, I've yeah, just built it up. But essentially what you're always doing is just if the type from the block is set to the respective like list item, etc., then to spit out this respective HTML. And that's how Sanity kind of converts and understands and communicates from its API call to your client to render respective HTML. So if I just go, oof, all right. Yeah. Thankfully, this site is dark mode, so we should be fine. Yeah. So if I just go to the inspect, Jesus Christ. All right. All right. I just wanted to show you, I've got a console log of the about, and this is basically the this is the injection from Sanity of the content. So it is quite convoluted, and I think if you were to try and access these nested objects just at a traditional JavaScript level, I think it would be quite frustrating. But you can see here, like within the children, you have like that kind of type which specifies what the type is, and then the content itself. So it ultimately just turns into this, which is like a body of text, a heading, and a list. I've got a lot going on, so this is my freelance project I'm doing, so you have to excuse it's not the most, I don't know, demo-friendly talk project, but yeah, either way, we're ultimately just like rendering HTML. I can't do it. And yeah, so we've got the serializer and the module, and that is how we kind of split and handle portable text in Sanity CMS. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions as best as I can. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you, James. Does anyone have any questions about Sanity or WordPress even? I guess.
I mean, you can try.
Yeah, I mean, how do you find working with the two, like, sort of different things? Is it like difficult to sort of? Because I mean, I think anyone that's done freelance occasionally.
Yeah, I think Sanity right now is probably like quite like hot and sexy in the market, so it's quite like flexible and fluid, which is always a pleasure to work with. But no, I do enjoy working with WordPress. It's, I mean, PHP, yeah, it's still good. Like ultimately, I've tried to move away from thinking about these like languages in their respective like trendiness, and rather just trying to think of code as its bare minimum. Like PHP is a server-side language. It provides the content to the client, and then I just have to like yeah, mess with it or whatever. So yeah, no, working with the two is fine. I think I'm a bit more skewed to Sanity just because the projects I work with Sanity, I end up working with my friends, and it's just quite, I don't know, like cowboy rock and roll rather than more like traditional like Jira tasks and etc. So
Cool.
yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? Just wave if you do.
Yeah. Microphone. Yeah, so I was a bit curious. So Sanity gives you this query language for you to get the data. Why does it give you can you say a bit more about why you need that component again? Or like why, like a content block or like from Sanity?
Yeah, so, yeah, sure. Like, so ultimately, Sanity is dealing with that JSON export, I guess. And so if you were to try and, I don't know, like iterate over that object without this kind of like module and the serializer, it would just be really painful. Like there'd be a lot of like nested things. Portable text, like as you saw in that kind of console log, it split all the elements of this respective text block by objects. And I guess one of the problems that we've experienced at work is that we want to inject certain components at certain points in the body of text, which working with WordPress means that we're going to have to almost like rerun the client and calculate with jQuery where to position it, how to split the text, etc. But with something like Sanity, you'd be able to kind of do that preemptively because of the nature of how the content is presented in an object. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, mate. Like,
Yeah, cool, thank you.
Cool. Anyone else? Which way are we doing?
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed that, and you've actually made me think a lot about so many things. Thank you so much. I think my question is in relation to things like speed and iteration. So what would you say is the difference between the headless CMS as compared to the traditional one? Because you say this is like a hot topic in the market, it's an advanced system. As compared to the tradition, how would you comment regarding the speed and iteration? And also taking into consideration that the threads are quite long, so you kind of the responsiveness is quite fast as well. So I just wanted to find out from you about the speed and iteration.
I guess just before I dive in, are you talking about the speed of the services themselves as CMSs? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely Sanity being very stripped back, it's a quicker response. The fact that you have real-time collaboration demonstrates that everything is just firing off very quick and moving. You can see when users click to respective fields, so there's almost like a user profile with highlighting. Having worked with 2 other developers on the Sanity Studio, whenever we're entering in content, it is very rapid. That's not to take away from the speed at which you're able to interact and enter with WordPress, but I'm just aware that in terms of like the ecosystems in which both content management systems exist within, for example, just entering text into WordPress, when you have to load that, you've got to load like the commenting plugin, you've got to load the themes, etc., like the whole back end. There's a lot more that you're loading that you might not necessarily want to or do interact with, whereas compared to Sanity's, what I describe as content-driven design, it's essentially very minimal. So yeah, Sanity is quicker, but it just depends how quick you can click around the screen, really. So yeah.
Thanks for that.
Cheers. Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a question about so you sort of authenticate with Sanity. So what's running locally and is the data also on their side, and then you just run the, yeah.
Sure, yeah, no, so you run the, where are we? I can't do it, but like there, you see localhost, like, yeah, so my client, Sanity Studio, is running locally, but the data set in which I'm working with is production. So you could then host that same Sanity Studio on Vercel, and working locally or on the staged studio, it would be the same data set, because I haven't chosen to configure my Sanity to have, say, like a production or development data set. So yeah, you can work with the same data across both hosted and local. And that's probably one of the only pain points with Sanity, is that you do need an internet connection to create that connection with the database, I guess. Even though you're working locally, you need to have internet to connect to Sanity. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, sweet.
Cool. Any more questions? Awesome. Thank you, James.
Yeah,
Another
so
round of applause.
Cheers.
Cool. And with that, we're going to just do a quick switch over, do a second talk, and then do pizza and beer, because we're not really allowed pizza in this room, which is a bit annoying. Yeah, so if you switch, and you use the microphone for Grant as well. Cool. So what I want to do is just invite, because Jamie earlier said that he had a little announcement or question for the community. So do you want to come up and ask thing? Pitch?
It's more of an announcement.
Yeah. Cool.
So I hold the mic.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi everyone. I'm Jamie. I'm on the lookout for a developer to join a project, side project, weekend project, kind of venture that I've been working on. It's a web app called Megged, and it's for small-sided football groups to track their stats and generate a league, and it's really quite fun, and we've been piloting it in Edinburgh and getting a lot of traction initially and testing out some of the product. If you want to take a bit more of a look at what it's about, head to get.megged.co. I've got a little, for the cameras here, I wrote it down. There we go. A bit more context, there's two of us at the moment, as I say, working on it as a side project. So if anyone is interested, please feel free to come and have a chat with me. And yeah, take a look at that website. Thanks.
Awesome. Cheers. Does anyone else have any job opportunities, wanting work, anything like that? Time to share? Cool, awesome. One thing that I should point out whilst we're here, I think I said it to you, most things, is this drink that we've got for Anton, who is part of the community. It's Quaz. There's some outside if you want to sample it. It's non-alcoholic, kind of like kombucha, from Estonia, that kind of thing. So he set up some fermenting kit and got a labeler and can maker, so he's trying to make that as a business. So please do take a look at that. Yeah, he's gone from like biology to doing a little app to now making drinks. So he's definitely meets the definition of an entrepreneur. So yeah, if you want to try that, try it out and go on his Instagram and let him know what you think. That's really good. So Grant's just going to plug in and get sorted out for... Just throw it in there. So I should say that we are looking for speakers for our April and May events. I've got a couple of people lined up to do talks at some point. So if you want to do a little talk, it can be on something interesting, like a tool that you've been using, or framework or whatever, cool little JavaScript tricks, or perhaps you just want to share your stack that you've used at work. It can be anything from a 5-minute, this is who I am, this is what I do, introduction to the community, through to like a full 20-minute technical talk. And now we'll find out where on the spectrum Grant's talk is with an introduction to Solana. Cheers, Grant.
Hi, Grant.
So yeah, I just want to do a quick introduction to Solana and working with JavaScript in Solana. Basically, I'll do a quick run through of some basic sort of introduction about Solana, and then do a quick demo, which is going to be how to make a on-chain token using just JavaScript. So I think I'd just like to say I'm pretty new to the whole sort of crypto development stuff, but I didn't realize before getting into it that you can actually build a lot and do a lot in that kind of world, in the Web3 world, just with JS. Like, you really don't need to know anything else to start building. Yeah, who am I? Web developer, a company called Vault. They're a startup in Edinburgh. Basically, we're doing sort of exclusive experiences, music, digital content via NFT ownership. So you buy NFTs, you trade them, and it unlocks musical tracks, things like this. But early stages, we started in this last October. So I'm still a bit of a Solana newbie, and I've sort of dived into it pretty, in the last 6 months. I've sort of had a quick introduction to the world of Web3. We work with React, Next.js, Firebase, Amplify. We use for hosting, serverless. So it's a lot of your kind of standard, as they would say in the Web3 world, it's standard Web 2 stuff. And then we use some, basically some libraries for doing NFTs. I've recently started learning Rust, which is for the back end, which is for on-chain smart contracts, but it's I'm not really going to talk about that in this talk. So a little bit about Solana. Launched in 2019, so it's quite a modern blockchain. It's what's called a third generation proof of stake blockchain. You have like Bitcoin as your first generation, Ethereum is your second, and there's a host of new blockchains now that have sort of a lot of improvements compared to previous generations. Proof of stake sort of means that it's not very costly in the way that Bitcoin and Ethereum are. They're proof of work, they require all this mining. Proof of stake is where you basically you stake money or tokens on chain as a collateral. But I'm not very versed in all this stuff, so I don't want to get too into that. So it's also really eco-friendly for a blockchain. A transaction is about 1,800 joules, which is about less than 2 Google searches per transaction. So compared to things like Ethereum, it's very eco-friendly. Transaction fees are very low, fraction of a penny, and block time is around 800 milliseconds, which means any transaction you do on the chain can be done in less than a second. Currently, they process around 2,500 transactions per second. So that compares like favorably, obviously, to things like Ethereum, which are 12 transactions per second. The reality with this is that really you're talking about 1,000 transactions per second, really, because most of those are actual validators casting votes on chain. So in terms of actual payments processed, it's about 1,000 per second. They claim they can scale to 65,000 per second, but I think that's a theoretical number, and I don't know if that's really ever been realized. So just to compare this to like a network like Visa, they handle on average 1,700 transactions per second. They say they're capable of 24,000, but the reality is something like Solana today is not too far off being competitive with a network like Visa. And yeah, it's evolving quickly. It's growing really fast. You have obviously NFTs. You have decentralized finance, gaming, payments, and DAOs, which we were talking about before with James. I think like the really interesting area here is the decentralized finance. There's like a lot of interesting things being built around that, and I think that's where a lot of the potential is. So to use Solana, like you could just go into Coinbase and buy the token Solana, but you can't do much with it. If you want to do something with it, you need a native wallet, which is usually a browser extension. That's going to allow you to sign transactions and call smart contracts and mint things and all that kind of stuff. The most popular is called Phantom. They have, well, you can see here from this chart, they've experienced really rapid growth, and the whole ecosystem is kind of like this. Since last summer, it took off really quickly. Phantom has, as of January around 2 million monthly active users. And that's just one of several native wallets that are available. It's also, I think Brave, the browser, announced recently that they're going to build native support for Solana into their browser and have some kind of native wallet built in. So I just want to run through a few of like the projects so you get an idea of all the different stuff that's being built. Metaplex is, there's an organization, they're non-profit. They were originally part of Solana Foundation and were spun off, and they basically do NFT smart contracts. They have a storefront where you can sell your own NFTs and artwork. And they have something called Candy Machine, which is used for all the, I don't know if you see like monkeys and these kind of weird animals that people have on Twitter as their profile pictures. All that stuff comes from Candy Machine. It's sort of like you hit a button and it gives you a random NFT, basically. Magic Eden is the leading marketplace. They've just raised 27 million in Series A. They do about 440 million volume in the last 30 days, and they have 210,000 active users in the past 30 days. So it's really, really active. Like, you know, the NFT marketplace is kind of crazy now. You even have like Shaq using Magic Eden recently, and obviously all these celebrities are jumping in. Great protocol. They're basically tools for online communities. So you buy an NFT, you join a DAO, you use Great Protocol to like validate yourself and join a Discord. And they have tools for like online voting for DAO communities. Serum is one of the big ones. They do decentralized order book, and they just raised 70 million. Radium is what's called an automated market maker. They actually build on top of Serum. So one of the really interesting things in this area is that there's a lot of composability, and you have a lot of protocols building on top of each other. So Radium, you can do a swap on Radium, and they will use Serum's decentralized order book, Serum's liquidity pools, or otherwise they will use their own liquidity pools if they can give you a better rate. You can also, you can actually put money into the liquidity pools on Radium and earn yield from that. So sort of like make money by providing, and this is like the decentralized aspect, whereas traditionally you would use like even Coinbase or one of these centralized companies. With decentralized finance, you can provide your own liquidity and earn yields on that. And I think this is why like companies like Coinbase are inevitably going to be forced to do 0% fees, because eventually it's going to be very hard to, I think, compete with projects like Serum that have very, very low fees. So there's Marinade as well, which you can earn yields from staking Sol. That's where proof of stake comes in. Solana Pay is pretty interesting. It's a new project by Solana where it's basically like a protocol for merchant payments, and they've already done a Shopify integration. So you can buy stuff on Shopify. They have integrations for like point of sale stuff, so you could buy with USDC using your phone. And then things like Audius, audio streaming platform, they recently moved from Ethereum, or they're kind of moving over from Ethereum to Solana. And Star Atlas is like an example of a game being built on Solana, which they're building with Unreal Engine 5. I think it's sort of design phase, and a lot of this stuff is quite early and very speculative at the moment. But I think essentially it's the decentralized finance stuff which is the most promising. So development, smart contracts are written in Rust. The core of Solana is built in Rust as well. Other than that, you have a Solana command line interface for deployment. For local testing, you can run a local validator and then run tests against that. And then JavaScript SDKs otherwise for basically you have Web3.js, SPL token, Metaplex, wallet adapter are the main ones that you'll use. You also have Anchor framework, which is by Serum, and that's sort of a full stack framework for building a front end in JavaScript, and you write your smart contracts in Rust. So how does it work? You have what's called the D app, which is basically just a web app. It communicates with what are called RPC nodes. Transactions contain instructions. So transactions basically have an instruction which will say which method to call on a smart contract. Accounts, I think like a good way to think about how this works is it's essentially like a global database, and it's a key value store. So you think about like something like Firebase, like simple, Firebase data storage. It's very much like that. Every account has a public key, and that's the key, and then that account can hold data. So yeah, as I said, like there's accounts, they have private public key pairs. Each account is owned by a program, and programs can execute transactions. And the weird thing, what seemed weird to me initially when I sort of started learning about this stuff, I had the idea that blockchains are immutable somehow. But they're not actually. Like accounts hold data like as a state, and it's completely mutable, that data. What's immutable is the sort of transaction history of that. So you can replay through it all, you can time travel through it and reproduce the state. But the data on it is just like any kind of key value store in a database, essentially. So I wanted to show you like an example of this is like a part of a transaction. There's lots of different stuff that goes into transaction, but this is maybe the most important part. You have basically two accounts here, and then you have some values like is signer, is writable. Is signer basically is, does this account need to sign with its private key that basically for the action it's going to do. In this case, we're creating an account. It's the most basic transaction you can do on the Solana blockchain. The program ID is 00, which is the system program. You have like the core system programs. You have on top of that like SPL token programs, which deal with creating tokens. Then you have Metaplex tokens for Metaplex programs, sorry, for doing NFTs. So these all build on top of each other. This one is calling the most basic one. We have with it the data, which is a buffer of data, which is basically contains all the necessary information for like, we're creating an account, we have to give it some money, we have to, LAN ports essentially is the unit here. We have to, well, I can't remember actually everything that goes into this data buffer, but the first 0 is actually the method that you're calling. But what you'll see later is you don't actually have to write it like this. We use a JavaScript SDK, and it serializes everything for you. So an example of a request to a node. So if you want to get data off the blockchain, you would call an RPC method like this. This one is get account info. If it was a transaction, you would call send transaction. And in the parameter, you would actually be sending the serialized transaction. In this case, I'm calling my wallet. I'm saying, get me the account info. And I would get a response like this from the node, which would tell me, basically, this is my wallet I'm calling, so it's just a really basic account. Like all user wallets are essentially just an account with nothing else in it except a few LAN ports. The owner is 111, so it's owned by the system program. So this is a, I know I've sort of just thrown a lot of like general information at you, so let me know if, I don't know if anyone has any questions at this stage, or if there's anything that just doesn't make sense that I've said. Feel free to ask. But yeah, so we're going to do a token. I'm using this diagram that I didn't make myself, I found online, which sort of outlines how this works. So I think like I understand that like on Ethereum, if you have a token, it's sort of just a singular thing in a sense. I'm not sure. But what I found sort of hard to get my head around when I first started working with Solana is the way that the accounts work. So even for a simple thing like a token, it's not just a singular thing. It's like different accounts that interact with one another. So we have here in the white are the programs. So that's like the programs that live on the blockchain, execute code. You have the system program, which I mentioned before is like the core program that deals with account creation. The token program is SPL token, which is sort of the standard for creating tokens. So they're the two that we're going to be calling. We also have here the yellow one, the user account, is your wallet, basically. So it's just a standard account, but that will be, if you use a Phantom wallet, that will be the thing that you're interacting with there. Then we have the green one is the mint account. So a mint is the thing that is sort of the authority over a token. It can basically issue money to whoever you want, as long as that is not frozen. And then you have the token account in the middle. So you need a specific kind of account to hold a specific token. And that account has to be derived in some way from the mint account itself. And then, so for me, for example, I would have a token that is derived from the mint account, but the owner is me. And then this account is basically capable of holding these tokens. So I don't hold tokens in my wallet. My wallet is simply the owner of various accounts that holds tokens. It's sort of the weird way that Solana works. So yeah, that's it for my slides. Basically we can dive into the code now and look at sort of some examples of how this works. So I'll just show you the libraries we're using here. We have SPL token is for creating tokens. These ones are all basically for interacting with the extension. So you can get going really quickly with this if you install these wallet adapter libraries. You can then very quickly like interact with any wallet extension you might have in your browser. Solana Web3 is the standard one. And apart from this, it's really just standard create React app. I had some issues setting this up because with version 5, there's some weird conflicts with SPL token, but then they just sort of disappeared. So yeah, we're going to do 3 things here. We're going to generate a new key pair. We're then going to create a token mint, which is the sort of authority of the token. You can see all the transactions here. And then we're going to call mint2, which will basically create a token account for me. So this is all quite abstract, but we'll ground it like this. If I wanted to make a doggy coin, how would I do it, right? If I wanted to make I don't know, what's a good dog, like a spaniel coin, say, or a poodle coin. You need to choose one that doesn't exist. So basically, we're going to make a token here. It won't have any kind of associated metadata. It's just a mint, and it has some numbers. The next step to that is essentially you just make a pull request to, there's a repository on Solana. You can basically add your picture of your doggy there. And and then it will be automatically merged into this big JSON file. The wallets like Phantom basically pull from that repository once a day or so. So then after a day, you'll have a proper doggy coin, and that's as simple as it is. Like with all of this code, you can do that. Obviously, it's probably still worthless, the doggy coin, but so yeah, I'll go through this in a little bit more detail. So let's see, we have the provider here, which is basically this is a copy and paste essentially from the wallet adapter example. So this is how easy it is to get going in terms of like connecting to a wallet and interacting with that. It comes with a bunch of hooks that you can then use to interact with like your wallet. You need to select the network you're connecting to. So there's mainnet. It's called mainnet beta because like technically Solana's still in beta phase. Then you have devnet, which is for testing stuff but live online. Testnet is also like kind of like devnet, but it's supposed to be used for different stuff. And then you can connect to a local network if you wanted to test stuff locally. So this one we're going to do on devnet, so we'll actually be able to see the transactions live on chain. I'll show you actually, I was meaning to show you this, but just as a nice kind of visualization of this stuff, there's this pretty cool website, Solana Beach. So this actually shows you live all the validators that are active. So you have, there's validators and then there's RPC nodes. So RPC nodes are like URLs that you can call that are going to give you data. You actually have to use a specific URL. So there's like this idea of the cluster, but you're calling a specific URL. There's like free ones, but or there's sort of standard Solana ones, but they will rate limit you eventually. The validators are the ones that actually validate incoming transactions. You can see here there's a current leader, which is being rotated. And what the current leader does is they sort of take up all the transactions that are coming in. They sort of slice them up into what's called entries, which are kind of like blocks of transactions, and then disperse them out to the other validators to be validated. You can see here like the TPS is running at 2,800, but most of these are, you can see the green are the votes, the blue are the non-votes. It's very small, so hard to read. But you can see most of these are actually votes on transactions. So the true TPS is actually much lower in reality, but they'll never they'll never tell you that. And you can, this is a cool website, I think, just to get an idea of how it all works. But if you go to say transactions, you can see all the live transactions that are coming in. So this is really just a public database is, I think, like the useful way of thinking about this. And you can see every mutation that's done on that database. So going back to the code, once you connect up your wallet adapter, you can then call these useful hooks for getting the connection, which is required for like the RPC calls, and the wallet for signing transactions. So with like all accounts have a private and a public key. Almost all accounts do. When you get your wallet, you're basically just creating a bog standard account that has a private and a public key. Your wallet keeps that private key and keeps that safe so that becomes your identity. When you do a transaction, you sign the transaction with the private key, and then it's verifiable on the other side if they can basically unhash that with the public key, then it's verifiable that this private key signed this, or sorry, that this public key signed this, and only their private key could basically get that result. So yeah, we're going to do, first function is generate key pair. This is going to just give us a public private key pair, which we're going to use to create our mint account, essentially. Then we're going to actually create the mint account. To do this, we're going to create a transaction object, using the Web3 library, then we're going to, this is where it starts to cost some money, because every account basically needs to, there's this, how to explain this, is like this concept of rent. And basically rent is like, if your account is to live in memory, you actually need to provide some money. That money, if it's rent exempt, which means if it meets the minimum balance, that money will just stay there. And then when you want to delete your account, you can get your money back. So when you create accounts, it will cost a little bit. Like maybe in this instance, you're going to pay like 20 cents or something for creating this this account. So we're going to then create a few instructions that we're going to add to this transaction. So the first one is the basic one. We just create an account. We're using the LAN ports that we just calculated here, which is like the minimum balance for rent exemption. We're giving it a certain space because it's going to be a mint. We need to say this account is going to need to have an X amount of data. Yeah, this is the wallet that's creating it, and the actual the public key, the address, is the key pair we just created. So yeah, then we're going to initialize it. I won't go too much into this, and we're going to assign ourselves as a fee pair. We're going to attach a recent block cache, which is sort of necessary to add a time limit on that transaction. And then we're ready to send it at this step. So we can call wallet send transaction. That will actually sign the transaction. And then it will return a transaction ID once it's sent to the RPC node. We can then use confirm transaction to make sure that it actually is confirmed on the network. The interesting thing here is that the key pair itself, it needs to be one of the signers. So for an account to create itself, it also needs to sign the transaction. So two signers here are the wallet and the key pair. Then we're going to do the mint2, which is essentially we say we have a token, a mint account, and then we're going to say like, give us some money, basically. At this stage, it's just a mint, but we can sort of extract any supply from it at all. So what we're going to do in this transaction, the final one, is we're going to create an associated token account so we can hold some of the tokens. We're then going to send ourselves 1 million tokens of whatever this token is that won't have a name. Maybe I'm being greedy, but you can only do it once. And then we're going to then freeze it. So we'll say set the authority to null, so then nobody is able to then mint anything else from that. So this is usually how tokens are created. They'll be given a fixed supply of something like, billions usually, and then they'll have their authority set to null, and then they become deflationary in some way. And then we just do the same stuff here again. There's actually sort of concise methods you can call that will do this for you, but here I'm just sort of laying it out so it's a little explicit. It's actually what's happening. So with let's just show the demo now so we can. So yeah, basically I can click this button. Every time I click this, every time I click this, I'm generating a new key pair. So that's going to give me a public-private key. This will be the key pair, the public address of the actual mint. So let's see, to do this, I'll actually need to get my Phantom login. So let's see, this is on DevNet. None of this is actually real money. So on DevNet, you can just airdrop yourself tokens because you're going to need money to develop with. So you can just basically use the Solana client. You type Solana airdrop, it'll send you some tokens. You can then use that to test stuff with. So I have a demo wallet here where I airdropped to Sol to previously. So I'm going to use the wallet adapter to connect to my Phantom wallet. Ask you to authorize, because you have to be careful what websites you connect your wallet to, because they could try to steal your money if you're not careful. So we can see now I'm connected. And we have here the, let's use this one. If we go to Explorer Solana, we can choose DevNet. So this is where you'll go to view accounts and to view transactions. And this is really useful for debugging when you're doing stuff. So if I type in this address just now, we'll see that the balance is 0 Sol. Basically, this account doesn't exist, no transaction history. So let's try and generate a token at that address, a token mint. So I've clicked that. Now, this is basically when you call send transaction, my wallet is going to ask me to sign it. I can view the transaction details. The two instructions here are create account and initialize mint. Create account is, like I said, like really basic. We're just creating an account and giving it a certain number of LAN ports and space. It shows you here how much we're going to send. And then initialize mint is sort of like you're calling a program which is just going to initialize the state so that this is ready to be used as a mint. So that these are basically functions that are going to be called on chain. So there we go. So that transaction confirmed. You can see it's like really, really quick. And then I can go now back to this account. And we can see it exists now. So like if I refresh this page, we get the same result. So we now have a token mint here, but the current supply is 0. So the next thing we have to do, actually give it some supply, actually issue some tokens. So I'll call this next function mint2. Same again, I'm going to be asked to approve this transaction. You can see here, I'm going to issue 1,000,000 tokens. It's going to be the balance change. So it's able to basically calculate the result of this transaction, which will be, I'm going to spend this amount of Sol, and I'm going to get in return 1,000,000 of my doggy coin. So let's see if this goes through. There we go. So if we refresh this again, we can now see the fixed supply is 1,000,000. Let's see if it comes up in my wallet. So now, if I go into my wallet, I have an unknown token. So this is because for this to become a known token, we basically need to make a pull request to the Solana repo. And then, it would have some metadata, basically like a photo and a name. The other thing you can do with a token is you can turn that into an NFT, or what's called a fungible asset, which is sort of like an NFT, but with a supply of more than one, but with a similar style of metadata. That would actually exist in this tab as a collectible. So yeah, that's it. We have this now. You can see the transaction history now here as well, where our address, this is the demo wallet we used. You can see the money that left that account. That was basically the cost of the transaction and the cost for account creation. This was the account that was created. You can see all the instructions here. Yeah, and that's it, I guess. Obviously, I think it's hard to go from like how you're making just this random token. It doesn't have any application on its own. It's not really useful. It doesn't have any value. But this is sort of the foundation on which all applications are built, and then you can start building from there quite interesting stuff on chain. So yeah, if anyone has any questions.
That's really awesome. I think it's this sort of thing where I look at all this stuff and I'm like, there's so much I don't know that is so hyped in this world, and there's so much to learn. So that's really great. Does anybody have any questions for Grant about Web3 tokens, crypto? James.
So you showed us the diagram and they have like respective arrows. I wondered, is that quite important where the arrows are pointing in terms of like how the data is communicating, I guess?
Yeah, so the arrow that's coming from the data, the Mint account, to the user account, which is your wallet essentially, that's showing that when you create this token, we would set the Mint authority as ourselves, basically. And then the token account here would set its Mint account as the Mint account we just created, because you need what's called a token account to hold tokens from that Mint, but the owner would be us. So everything's sort of interconnected. And then when you start doing like NFTs, you then have other accounts like metadata accounts, master edition accounts, and it gets bigger and bigger. And I think this is sort of the part of developing with Solana that I found difficult, is understanding how all these accounts fit together. But once you get your head around that, it's actually not very difficult to work with, I would say, compared to standard JS stuff.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Awesome. Cool. Well, we've got beer and pizza, so you can pick Grant's brain. Here I have a stupid question, not in front of everyone later. So next month, April, it is the 21st of April, third Thursday every month. Hopefully back here if we get the room bookings again. If you want to speak at that, then let me know. Either come and chat to me after or send us a tweet at EdinburghJS on Twitter. Thank you very much for coming, and see you next month. Cheers. Awesome. So there's some pizza outside.